Happening. We're going over this um origins because people find out later and they're like, wait a minute, I didn't hey, why didn't anybody tell me about this? I'm like, well, nobody stopped you from looking it up. They weren't trying to hide anything, but okay, so yeah, Wittgenstein went to grade school with Hitler. Philosopher, I don't know what exactly you would call his writings. Martin Heidegger, also, I believe, philosopher. He was Nazi, worked for the Nazi Party at least. Um, and he fused it with Einstein. Oh, the form is. So, and then we have Bucky Fuller, The Secret, Eckhart Tolle, and Buddhist guy. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Warner met a Buddhist guy. John Denver, Jeff Bridges, Diana Ross, Jerry Stiller, Ben Stiller, Ariana Huffington, Sergey Brin, George Soros, Steve Jobs, John McKay, Carlos Slim Helou, Mark Hurd, Oprah Winfrey, Ariana Huffington, Ray Dalio, Peter Diamandis, Evan Pagan. Okay, and then we go through this. Okay. So the audio in this video and writing is an education and communications enterprise which creates and delivers distinctions, a method of inquiry into the basic questions of human existence that actually enables and empowers an individual's ability to live and work in the world in an impactful, creative, authentic way. More than 4 million people, 5 million, 5 million people worldwide have participated in this inquiry since its inception. The basic course, known as the Forum, as well as courses and workshops on communication and productivity offered by area centers throughout the world. For more information, contact Landmark Worldwide. Timestamps are provided below. The transcription of this audio was recorded at the Daughters of the American Revolution Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. I wish I could do as warm a welcome, but my welcome is with all my heart. So thank you very much for being here. It's a real privilege for me to be able to be here with you, to be able to be here and be with you. We've really had a remarkable breakthrough recently in this work, what amounts to a major breakthrough in the possibility of the value of the work and its impact on the effectiveness of living and on the quality of life for people. I recognize as I go through these periods in this work where things become very creative and new possibilities open up that I owe a great deal to a lot of people. The opportunity for this work, I mean, really being able to do it at all is a product of an enormous amount of support from a lot of people. The work is possible out of those interactions and relationships and the actions people take with their lives, kind of like keeping their neck stuck out, living at risk, so to speak. This setup isn't so good when I stand in front of a camera and speak because it looks like a lecture or a talk or something like that. And I wanted to be clear about the nature of the video. The nature of this video is really in the nature of an inquiry. We're going to use the 3.5 hours. Let's see how fast we get through it. That we'll spend together to inquire into certain issues. And the issues into which I'd like to inquire are not the issues with which we're ordinarily concerned. In the normal course of events, we have this everyday way of being in the world. We have these everyday concerns, our relationships, our health, our work, our jobs, our finances, our children and their lives, our friends and their lives, the world, the nation. Tonight's an inquiry into something which underlies all of that, something underneath those concerns, which we have, which I'll call our everyday concerns, those concerns about our everyday way of being in the world. We want to inquire in this video into issues which are literally at the heart of the matter of being human. These are issues with which we're not normally engaged on an everyday basis. Hopefully, we've taken some time from time to time to engage in those issues. Maybe we've read a book at night about those issues. Maybe we've spent a few hours during the week engaged in those issues about what lies at the heart of the matter for human beings. For the most part, our everyday lives are not about that. So this video is going to be a bit of a strain on you because that I'm going to be asking you to kind of change your pace. The way in which we're engaged with life on an everyday basis, on a daily concerns basis, is not quite the appropriate mode for an inquiry into these issues which lie at the heart of the matter for human beings. We're going to take a look tonight, like a very serious look, like an inquiry, like asking the question, what kind of a being is a human being? We are all kind of take that for granted. It's like air to the bird or water to the fish. We kind of take it for granted. We kind of don't give much real thought to it. Not that we don't have certain beliefs about it. We very rarely stop to question what kind of a being is a human being. So this video, that's kind of the general question. What kind of a being is a human being? And I suggest to you that certain things will come up that may be difficult, that this is not an easy inquiry. There are not pat answers for this. As a matter of fact, some of the answers, some of the honest answers, some of the honest possibilities about that question are somewhat uncomfortable. So in addition to actually having to work in this video, to kind of have to be up on the edge of your seat with these issues, some of it may be a bit uncomfortable. In addition to the question, what kind of a being is a human being, I want to then go on, if we can get someplace engaged in that question, engaged with that issue, we want to go on a bit from there. And whatever opens up for us out of that inquiry to inquire into the possibility for human beings, we kind of take that one for granted as well. Those questions may not seem very exciting at first glance, since they don't have anything to do with looking good for the most part. I'm promising you that I want to be very clear about this promise, that the inquiry in this video, the work right now, is not some esoteric matter that has nothing to do with our everyday way of being in the world, with our everyday concerns, but rather we're doing this inquiry for its practical value, for the impact that it can have on our everyday being in the world, on our everyday concerns. So we have a very strange situation. We're going to be dealing with those issues that lie at the heart of the matter for human beings, those fundamental issues about being for human beings. And we're going to engage in this inquiry for a specific purpose. And the purpose is for the impact that it can have on our everyday concerns, on our everyday being in the world. Now, in the beginning, you may not see any relationship between this inquiry and, for instance, your relationships with your children. You may not see any correlation between this inquiry and your concerns at work, for your concerns in your relationships, for your social concerns, your concerns for the world. But I am promising you that there is a relationship. These issues that we're going to be addressing in this video are ancient issues. I didn't invent them, and the people with whom I worked didn't invent them, and nor did you invent them. They've been around a very, very long time. They're old questions. They're questions that came along with being human. They're questions that came along with our civilization. What we did invent, and what we're going to be working with you in this video, is a way of getting at these questions. So I want to be clear that while these questions have been gotten at by many different disciplines of humanity, that the method for this video, the discipline that we'll be using in this video, is one that we invented. I'll tell you why we invented it and what it's supposed to do. So the questions are ancient, and the method of inquiry, the discipline with which we will be using to get at those issues, is one that we invented for this occasion. The method we call distinction. It's not philosophy, although you'll hear some of the concerns of philosophy in the questions that we're asking in this video. It's not religion or theology, although you'll hear some of the concerns of real religion and theology in the questions that we're asking in this video. It's not many other disciplines like sociology or anthropology. So the questions about being that we're asking, this engagement with the fundamental questions, the fundamental issues for human beings about their own being. What kind of a being is a human being? What is the possibility of being for human beings? It's not a question that we want to ask in a philosophical domain. We don't want to ask it in a psychological domain. So tonight is not about this video is not about psychology, psychological or psychological approach to these questions. It's not anthropological, nor is it historical. We're not trying to get at the being of human beings in a historical domain. We're not trying to get at our being from the perspective of ourselves as individuals, from ourselves as a collective, from ourselves as society, but rather we want to get at these questions about being in the domain of being. So this is an inquiry into being in the domain of being. These distinctions are a discipline for dealing with being in the domain of being such that it's not designed to produce answers. Now, I know that may sound very strange to you because why ask a question and it doesn't produce an answer? I don't work for this organization, by the way. I have nothing to do with them. I just participated in these conversations about 20 years ago, and it's made a very great impact and just wanted to share it with people. Once, I don't know, I healed my back pain naturally. I I heard people had back pain and I just wanted to share. I mean, it's kind of hard not to. We're wired for compassion and we're wired to be admired as well. But it's not so like and subscribe, share, comment below. It's not designed to produce solutions. It's not designed to give people a prescription for living. It's not designed to produce a recipe for getting the things in life that you want. As it says here, the work is not about solutions, it's or answers. It's an inquiry into the nature of being. In the process of this inquiry, insights show up that profoundly impact the quality of our lives. So that's the nature of these distinctions. This particular way, getting at these questions does not produce answers. It does not produce solutions. It does not produce recipes. It does not produce prescriptions. What happens is that certain insights occur even though you don't get answers. Certain insights occur in the process of this inquiry using the invention of these distinctions to get at these questions, and certain insights will show up for you. Now, the insights don't show up necessarily like, oh, I see something I didn't see before, because that would be kind of like an answer. The insights will show up rather than like that as actual openings or a space for being or a freedom or an empowerment in your everyday being in the world. So I want to make that very clear. I'm going to repeat it. We're going to be inquiring into these issues at the heart of the matter for human beings. The discipline with which we're going to conduct this inquiry, engage in these issues, is the thing that we call distinctions. These distinctions are a way at getting at the issues that is not designed to produce answers or solutions or prescriptions or recipes, but rather as a way of getting at these issues such that insights will show up for you in the process of the inquiry. And these insights will be openings or breaking opens or a certain sense of freedom, or maybe more specifically, a being empowered, not here in your house or office or wherever you're watching this and thinking about it, being empowered in your everyday being in the world. Okay, yeah, kind of like that. In your everyday concerns and being empowered, I mean having a sense of freedom, a kind of new opening that was not there before, a sense of empowerment and facing the risk that being alive actually is. The challenge of our work, the challenge of our concerns for society, the challenge of personal and individual concerns, the challenge of our concerns like a culture, like a civilization, like a society. So that's the nature of the work in this video. What we're promising is that we're not promising answers. We're not promising a pleasant video. We're not promise What we're promising is an inquiry that will show up in your life, in your everyday being in the world, like a breaking open, like a freedom to be, like a possibility for being for your everyday concerns with your everyday concerns. And by the way, I want to be clear that I am clear. I know that everyone watching this video is successful. So if you thought I was speaking to you because I thought there was something wrong with you, or I thought you weren't successful, or you didn't know how to get along, or you weren't great, or you weren't doing well in life, that's not true. I'm clear that you're very, very successful. I'm also clear that when a person becomes successful, certain opportunities open up in their lives and they begin to recognize that whatever got them to wherever they are, when they recognize their own success, they recognize that somehow there are concerns and possibilities in life that what brought them to where they are don't match. There's this wonderful quote by Einstein, which I'll paraphrase, in which he says that the thinking that got us to where we are will be insufficient to solve the problems that go along with having got to where we are. So that while that thinking that you and I are, when I engaged in and got us to where we need to recognize to some degree that that very thinking, the one about which we're so proud because it got us to where we are, that very thinking also produces problems, which that thinking isn't powerful enough to solve. At any rate, we are all pretty proud of what we know, and we deserve to be proud of what we know. And we've accomplished a lot. We've accomplished a lot as individuals. We've accomplished a lot as a society. We've accomplished a lot as a nation. We've accomplished a lot as a race, human being. So we have this whole section of the world called What I Know. And now one of the things that happened to me as I grew up and learned more, things shifted. The more I learned, that is to say, the more I learned, the more I knew, the more I knew, the more I didn't know. So probably have a little section of your life, well, you've got this important thing called what you know, which you use to accomplish and work on the things you're working on and accomplishing in life. So you've got this section called I know. You've probably also got this other section called I don't know. And there's ways of working on what you don't know, and we all know how to do it. You ask questions with the intention of getting accurate answers. And when you're working on what you don't know, if you ask questions in an intelligent way and work on those answers, on getting accurate answers, and when you're working on what you don't know, if you ask questions, getting those answers in an intelligent way, you get answers and you may expand what you know. And maybe as you expand what you know, what you don't know expands a little bit more, as well as begin to see that there are other things that you don't know. Um, let's see if we can find this. Okay. Now, this video is not about what you know, nor might I add, is it about what I know. This is not about my opinions about the being of human beings. I promise not to give you my opinions. I will keep them to myself. I invite you to keep your opinions to yourself. That is to say, this video isn't about what you already know, what you've been taught, what you've learned, what we all know, what everybody knows, nor is it even about what you don't know. It's about what you don't know that you don't know. Now, very few people know anything about what they don't know that they don't know. So I've spent a good part of the last 19 years of my life struggling with the issue of what I don't know that I don't know. Now, I don't know much about it either, even though I've been struggling with it for a very long time. and I do know something about it. One of the things I know about it is the kind of questions, the kind of relationship that you and I have with what we know and what we don't know has no power in the domain of what we don't know that we don't know. So, what you and I are good at, which is knowing and finding out when we don't know, you and I are good at, which is both knowing and finding out when we don't know. None of that skill ability, none of that experience is much value when you begin to deal with what you don't know that you don't know. Particularly, for example, asking questions to get the answer. It doesn't work in the realm of don't know that I don't know. You see, you could say that we were blind to this, that this is our blind spot. And I give you an example and ask you to consider the example that asking to get the answer, which we're all very good at, dealing with questions for which we want the answer, which we're all very good at, isn't very powerful in dealing with what you don't know that you don't know. There is, however, a way to be with questions, a way to question, a way to be with a question which is appropriate to getting at what you don't know that you don't know. It's a kind of question or a questioning which you don't pose in order to get an answer, but which you pose in order to stand inside of, like a space to look out from, whatever there is in the world for you to look out to. So I say in this realm of not knowing that we don't know, there are ways to surface what we don't know that we don't know. One of the ways to do that is to ask questions that are designed for a purpose other than getting the answer to the question, to ask questions which rather than providing the answers to ask questions which generate new questions, which new questions actually begin to reveal certain parts of what we don't know that we don't know. So this video is about that. And I think you'd agree after hearing me speak about it for a few minutes, that's strange territory for most of us. Mostly, we don't engage in that territory. We don't deal in that territory. So this video may be difficult on that basis because you'll be in unfamiliar waters, not merely uncharted waters. That would be in the realm of not knowing, but knowing that we didn't know, rather we may be in waters that may not be like water. They may not act like water. So not only are they uncharted, they're really unknown, and there isn't anything not known about not knowing about them, something like that. At any rate, you get the point. So the question that we ask in this video, this question about what kind of being is a human being? What is being for human beings is a question not designed to get an answer, not designed to provide a solution, not designed to make you better, not to give you recipes for living, but rather a question in which to stand out from, which to look at your everyday being in the world, your everyday concerns. So that while the question is a little exotic, when you stand inside the question and look out, you're looking at what you're already very familiar with. You know, what is it looking from inside the question? What kind of a being is a human being? What is that you think? Looking from there, what is that you think? Looking from there, what is it that you don't think? What is it that you feel? Looking from the space of possibility, looking from that clearing, from that opening, what is it? What is that you feel? What is it that you feel? Looking from there, what is it that you don't feel? So it's that realm with which we're going to be dealing in this video. Now, I want to talk to you about for a moment, my own speaking. I want to be very clear that I'm not asking you to believe anything I say. In the normal course of events, when someone speaks, we assume that they're asking us to believe what they say. I'm not asking you to believe what I say. I'm not even saying that I believe it, but I mean what I say. I'm not saying it to fool you. I'm committed to what I say. I'm not pretending that what I say is true. And so you are relieved of the burden of having to figure out whether or not you agree with what I'm saying, because I'm not telling you that it's the truth. I'm not asking you to agree with it or to believe it. I'm simply asking you to be with it, so that if I say something, I'm inviting you to consider it like a possibility. I'm inviting you to stand inside the possibility of what I'm saying. Look out from it for yourself at your everyday being in the world, at your everyday concerns, the stuff about which your life is composed. So while I mean what I say and I'm committed to what I say, I'm accountable for what I say. I'm not asking you to believe it, nor am I attached to it. I am also willing to give it up. If when looking out from it and looking into my own life and my own concerns, something opens up for me and I suddenly become aware of something about which I wasn't even aware that I wasn't aware, and some new possibility arises, I'm not stuck with what I'm saying to you. Now, while I'm not asking you to believe, and I'm also not a guy in a diner. A lot of people don't know about a guy in a diner, so I'm going to tell you. When I was growing up in Illinois, my family took trips to visit people, and they were often long distances. And given the kind of family in which I grew up, the discussion would often go on late into the evening, very late for a guy as young as I was. And we would drive home sometimes very late at night. Often nights when this is when it's like raining or snowing out or nasty. Diners, as far as I knew, were places that you stop late at night to get a cup of coffee so you could stay awake while you're driving. At my age, I couldn't let anybody go do anything without me being there, so I always had to go in with them. And I learned about guys and diners. Guys and diners late at night, like I'm describing, that are usually fairly lonely because there are not a lot of customers late at night and they don't have anybody to talk to. And they're just love for somebody to stop in, because then they've got somebody to talk to. And you go in and you're the only person there and you sit up at the counter and you have your cup of coffee or whatever else. And you find out that this guy in the diner, the guy behind the counter, knows everything about everything. There's nothing about which he does not know. He knows what the president ought to do about the deficit. He knows what the country ought to do about its international relationships. He knows what you need to do about your marriage. He knows what kind of work you ought to do, and whatever work you are doing, he could knows how to do it better. He knows something about everything. So with regard to these issues about which we're dealing tonight, while I'm not professing to tell you the truth, while I'm sharing possibilities which I'm inviting you to entertain, I'm also not a guy in a diner about this. I've been doing this work for over 19 years with an enormous record of value for those people who participated in the work. So a little bit about, I like what Wittgenstein said about the work he was doing. He said, my proposition serves elucidations in the following way. Anybody who understands me eventually recognizes them as nonsensical. When he has used them as steps to climb up beyond them, he must, so to speak, throw away the ladder after he's climbed up on it. He must surmount these propositions, then he sees the world rightly. So I'm inviting you to climb up on my conversation with you in this video. Climb up on it in your own listening. Stand up on top of what is being said. Stand up on top in your own listening. Stand up on top and look out for yourself. This is really about doing your own thinking, thinking for yourself. And this notion about thinking for yourself, that is not what one ordinarily thinks of as thinking. So I want to be clear about that. What I mean by thinking for yourself, and what these kind of people who were quoted meant by thinking for yourself, Doing your own thinking is not that ordinary thing we call thinking. You know, those thoughts that keep going on in the back of your head, that isn't the kind of thinking about which these people were speaking. They weren't talking about your opinion or what comes out of your mouth when you say I think, or what comes out of your mouth when you say I feel, nor what comes out of your mouth when you say I believe. They were talking about that when you were talking about doing your own thinking. They weren't talking about that when they're talking about doing your own thinking. They were really talking about something like this: standing up on top of what's being said, climbing up on it, as Wittgenstein said, and looking out at life, at your life, at the world for yourself, looking for yourself, seeing for yourself. And so that's why I dare say anything at all. Not because I'm asking you to believe it, but because I'm asking you to climb up on it and look and think for yourself in a way in which we've now spoken about thinking. I'm also committed to not being a windbag tonight. That's not being a guy in a diner. I promised you earlier not to give you my opinion, not to tell you what I think, what I like, what I don't like, what I want, what I don't want. I want to read to you this really wonderful quote from Max Weber. He says, I am under the impression that 9 out of 10 cases I deal with windbags. Probably hung out with pretty good people if his batting average was that good. But at any rate, in 9 out of 10 cases, I deal with windbags that do not fully realize what they take upon themselves when they speak and when they listen and when they think and when they act and when literally when they are. So to intoxicate themselves is a romantic sensation. Like, I believe, maybe a romantic sensation. My experience has proven maybe a romantic sensation. Everybody knows maybe a romantic sensation. Everybody, all the best people know. I read maybe a romantic sensation. From a human point of view, this is not very interesting to me, nor does it move me profoundly. However, it is immensely moving when a mature person, whether old or young in years, is aware of a responsibility for the consequences of his speaking. You see, and I don't take our speaking very seriously. You and I don't take our speaking very seriously. We have no sense that we are our word. In fact, we pretty much don't trust each other's word anymore. The one way not to get elected is to make promises. Nobody trusts you if you make promises. He's aware of a responsibility for the consequences of his speaking, of his conduct, and really feels such a responsibility with heart and soul. He then acts by the following by following the ethic of responsibility. By the way, responsibility doesn't mean here blame or guilt or fault, something much more profound, something not like you and I ordinarily mean when we say, I am responsible for that. He's talking about something more profound. At any rate, he goes on to say, he then acts following the ethics and responsibility. In somewhere, he reaches the point where he says, here I stand. You don't hear that very much, do you? You hear, I'm here because, or let me tell you about what's right about why I'm here, or let me tell you why I'm here, or let me prove to you that here is the right place. No, he says at some point, he gets to the point where he says, here I stand, I can do no other. That is something genuinely human and moving. And every one of us who is not spiritually dead must realize the possibility of finding themselves at some point in that position. So this video is about that position. Again, I want to be clear with you that the work we do here in this video will be about the issues at the heart of the matter for human beings, but the purpose of engaging in those issues, the purpose of the inquiry in a very practical, hard-headed impact on our everyday concerns. This isn't some class in philosophy. This is not a theological discussion, nor, as I said, about one about history or anthropology or sociology. No. Its intention is to literally impact, like a break open, like empower us in our everyday being in the world. Now, I've used the word power a couple of times, and I want to be tell you what I mean by power because it's badly understood, or at least what I mean by it is often not well understood. So I can take about a half an hour to tell you what I mean by power, or I can actually read this quote by Charles Reich, in which he says what I mean in a paragraph. It really annoys me. It's just the time and efficiency. I'm going to read what he said rather than give you my half hour. I think my half hour is a little bit better, obviously, but I say for efficiency's sake, he says, power to me, this is a lecture he did on power and the law. He said, power to me pretty much means the same thing as freedom. Power is the thing that everybody wants the most they can possibly have of. That is, skiing is power, sex appeal is power. The ability to make yourself heard by your congressperson is power. Anything that goes out of you, anything that comes out of you and goes out into the world is power. And in addition to that, the ability to be open, to appreciate, to receive love onto others, to respond to others, to listen to music, to understand literature, all of that is power. By power, I mean faculties is an exercise in the largest possible degree. So in a way, in a large sense, by power, I mean individual intelligence. Now, when you reach out to another person through the energy or creativity that is in you, and that other person responds, you are exercising power. When you make somebody else do something against their will, that to me is not power at all. That is force. And force to me is the negation of power. So when I talk about this work, about having a practical, hard-headed impact on our everyday concerns and our everyday ability to deal with those concerns, on our everyday being in the world, and empowering ourselves on an everyday being in the world, that's what I mean by power, like that. Now, dealing with what we don't know that we don't know, this arena getting at what at that kind of a being human beings are is difficult stuff. I'm going to read you a paraphrase from a quotation by the philosopher Martin Heidegger from Being in Time. He's talking about this kind of being that human beings are. And what he says, people's kind of being thus demands that at any attempt to get at that being constantly has a character of doing violence. Whether that claims of the everyday interpretation or to its complacency or tranquilized obviousness. So he's talking about a particular kind of violence. He's talking about the kind of violent that Gandhi was, talking about the kind of violent Martin Luther King was, a violence to the claims of our everyday interpretation, what you already know, what common sense tells you, what's clear for you. So this video is in order to really participate in this, you're going to have the courage and the fortitude that and the commitment to that kind of ruthless honesty and compassion for the value that human beings might possibly be required to do violence to what you already know to be true. That which you believe, that which is your opinion, that which you literally, that which you identify. That's the kind of work that you need to be willing to do to come to know what you don't know that you don't know. And it's not easy and it's not comfortable. And tonight's not a show, or this video is not a show. And if you're here for a show, you're in the wrong place. I'm not entertaining. You can probably tell that already. You see, you and I have been trained to listen for prescriptions, listen for recipes. We've trained ourselves and been trained by our culture, by our practices of our culture to listen for solutions and answers. People go any place if it'll make them thinner, sexier, richer, etc. That is not about, this is not about getting better in this video. It's about freedom and power in our everyday being in the world. We're not here to reduce the risk that life is by getting answers. We're not here to reduce the risk that living is by finding solutions or getting prescriptions or finding a recipe or the answer. We're here rather to conduct this inquiry in a special way, in a way that we've developed, in a way that allows people in the process of inquiring for certain break opens to happen in their everyday being in the world. So this is not about following what I'm saying tonight. It's not about following my propositions. It's not even about understanding. Much of this you will not understand. I say that there are questions in life about which you are likely never to understand. But the inquiry into which, all by itself, if done in a particular way, can have enormous value all by itself. And I'm inviting you to engage with me in a conversation that happens in my speaking and in your listening. And your listening is not passive, not in an inquiry, it's not passive. Not while I'm inviting you to consider possibilities. If I'm talking at you, then you may listen passively. This video is not about passive listening. It's about being up on the edge of your seat with regards to these issues. One of the other things that I want to be clear about is that we live in a society in which is very committed to a psychological interpretation. We are a psychological interpretation. We figure each other out and figure ourselves out in a structure of psychological interpretation, like a set of assessments. We'll be talking more about that, and it will get clearer, and that will get clearer as we go along. And I want to be clear with you in this video that this video is not about psychology, nor philosophy, nor theology, nor sociology. It's an inquiry into being in the domain of being, in an ontological domain, if you like. We're going to be investigating our own authenticity. We're going to be coming to grips with our own authenticity, the nature of our being. Now, we abhor the notion of being inauthentic. We absolutely abhor it. We live in a society in which the name of the game is look good. And if you'll examine your own actions and your own thoughts and your own feelings from from the possibility that I just mentioned to you, stand in that space and look out from that space of possibility. That's a great deal of what you think and do and feel is shaped by a kind of cultural commitment to looking good. You see, it's not that you ever woke up one morning and say, gee, I want my life is going to be about looking good. No, you showed up in the commitment to looking good. So I want to be very clear that I know that I have no concerns for how I look in this video, nor how you look right now watching this, nor how I look, nor do I even have a concern about how human beings look. I have a concern for honesty, like ruthless honesty, and I'm going to invite you in this video to take a ruthlessly honest look at your own inauthenticity. Like I said, we abhor any possibility of being inauthentic, and that makes us inauthentic about being inauthentic. So we are essentially a cover up for our own inauthenticity that prompts Heidegger to talk about the need for violence, the need to break through this inauthenticity about your own inauthenticity. So that may be what we'll accomplish tonight. The possibility is that at least we can come to some degree of authenticity about our inauthenticity. Now that's going to be very strange for some people watching this video, because the first thing you think of, you the because the first thing you and I want to do when we find something that's wrong is fix it. That's the listening for solutions. That's that listening for getting better. That's that interpretation. That's that commitment to looking good. So I'm inviting you in this video to hold off on solving a problem of your own inauthenticity. I'm rather inviting you to do an experiment with me to see What can happen in a practical, hard-headed way in terms of empowering yourself and your everyday concerns in your everyday being in the world by being authentic about your own inauthenticity, engaging in this question, what kind of a being is a human being? I'm inviting you tonight or in this video to give yourself permission to be with your own inauthenticity, because the beginning of this video is really devoted to coming to an authenticity about your own inauthenticity. I'm asking you to be in the question, to be in the opening. The question is to be in the clearing, the question and the possibilities we examine, to get beyond what you think or feel, beyond your opinion or belief, and just be in the clearing of the question, looking out not to validate the question, not to validate the possibility or invalidate it, but looking out from the possibility, looking out from the space just to see what you see. When you're looking out from that space at your everyday being in the world, at your everyday concerns, be with your own life in this video. Be in the space of possibility that the work is. Looking out at and being with your own life, the way you live, be with that. Be with what you say, be with what you think, what you feel, what you do. Be with what you don't do. Be with what you don't say, and with what you don't think and you don't feel. See, we want to see, how does being show up in an everyday way of being in the world for human beings that is not esoteric or complex. It's simple, truthful. Look at what's present when you look at your life from the space of certain questions, from the space of certain possibilities. You may be surprised by some of the answers. You may even be dismayed by some of the answers. As a matter of fact, I suggest that you will be. Now, this thing about what everybody knows, you see, there was a time that everybody knew that there were witches. There are witches. You see, we burned people at the stake because there are witches. Lots of very terrible things have happened in our civilization and society because there are certain things which are so. Now, by now, you and I all know that witches don't exist. It's a superstition. We stop burning people for being witches. I want you to consider something. First off, I want you to see that superstitions are very powerful. And they're only powerful. A superstition is only powerful when they're not superstitions. You see, if I say the black cat walking in front of me is bad luck, the black cat as an is will determine my behavior. That's real power. Or more accurately, that's real force. I'm inviting you to consider the possibility of an enormous power that superstition has, and then further to look at that, the fact that a superstition is only a superstition when it's not a superstition. A superstition is only a superstition when it is an is. The black cat walking in front of me is bad luck. And all of those things in my life which are so determine the conduct of my life. Not only the conduct of my life, but in many ways the quality of my life. Suppose you say, suppose you don't say, more accurately, you aren't that black cats are bad luck. You aren't even that black cats are thought to be bad luck, but who you are is black cats being bad luck is a superstition. Now, I say that's a remarkable insight. I say that is a remarkable insight, and it begins to give you a certain insights into your own life when you recognize that superstitions have an enormous force in people's lives. They determine the options with which people live, and that a superstition can be disempowered, unforced, by simply recognizing it as a superstition. And at any step in the direction away from is towards superstition gives a person more and more freedom to be, and more freedom to live, more of a breaking open of possibility, more empowerment. So I'm saying that if there are things in your life which are for you and is, and more likely than not, you are unaware that you are unaware of them, that simply becoming aware of them produces a breaking open in your everyday way of being in the world. Now I'm going to say something, and what I'm going to say, I'm not saying is true, and I'm going to say it, and I'm not a guy in a diner. I say that the you that you are when you say I am is a superstition. That's a very strange thing to say. I'm saying it anyhow, and I mean it. And I didn't say it was true. I'm just inviting you to stick your toe in this video, and we'll see how far you want to get inside of the I that you're speaking about when you say I think. You know that I in the phrase I think, the I that points at, I'm suggesting to you that that's a superstition. Now, you don't even think that you're that. You are that you are that. You are that you are the I that's pointed to in the phrase I think. You are that you are the I which is pointed to in the phrase I feel. You are, it's not even that you think these things, not even that you believe them, even. You are that you are this. You are that you are this, much deeper, like a real superstition, like one that's not even considered, that isn't even considered, like one to which you are blind. I say that you are the I pointed at in the phrase I like, I want, I don't want, I think, I feel, I believe, and I say that's a superstition. And we'll see. Be clear that the interpretation has enormous power. People get burned about interpretation that witches are. Never mind whether they are or not. The interpretation has enormous power. The black cat is bad luck, has enormous force. So, what is it that drives our life? What is it that drives our identity? That's the question at which we're going to look. What kind of a being is a human being? See, most of us don't give much thought to it because we think it comes with the territory. We think, yeah, I'm a human being and I'm using being to get along in life. I mean, I'm a human being and I see all those faculties that all human beings have to accomplish the things that I accomplish in life, to conduct my relationships, to do my job, to pursue my good concerns I have in life. Well, there's some bad news about that. You see, human being was here before you ever showed up. Human being was here before you were ever thought of. Maybe, just maybe, human being, because it was already here and already had a direction, already had a thrust, already had a scope of possibility. Just maybe human being is using you. You see, I know that you and I live that we're using being. I'm asking you to consider that the possibility that you showed up in a human being and it uses you in its direction and in its thrust. You don't use it. It already was, it already was when you showed up, and it already had a thrust, a scope, a definition. It already was a certain set of options, and those options are using you. You see, you say we say in our everyday language, I say you don't think. And I want you to consider the possibility that you don't think. I want you to stand in that possibility. You understand what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not asking you to agree or disagree. I don't want to know what you think about whether you think or not. I'm inviting you to stand in the possibility it isn't you thinking. Certainly, there are thoughts, that's obvious. There are thoughts. Anybody that's alive and human knows that there is thinking, that there are thoughts. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that there aren't thoughts. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that it isn't you thinking. I'm asking you to stand in the possibility that it thinks and you have the thoughts. Now, if it's you thinking, if you're really committed to that it's you thinking, then stop thinking. You notice you can't do that? That's because that isn't you thinking. It thinks, and you have the thoughts it thinks. And you live the superstition that you think. You don't think it thinks. And one of the things that it thought up is you. You notice it thinks a lot about you? You are one of its favorite things about which to think. And you are limited, for the most part, to the possibilities which show up in its thinking. So I'm inviting you not to consider the validity of what I just said. I truly don't care about what your opinion is. Listen, let's get this thing about your opinion handled. Next time it's clear in Washington, go out on the banks of the Potomac, out where the memorials are, maybe, and look up at the stars and tell them your opinion and see what they do about it. Tell them what you think and tell them what you feel. Tell them what you believe. You tell them and watch them very carefully. See, tell them what you want, what you don't want, what you like, and what you don't like. You tell them and watch their response to your opinion, to what you want, what you think, what you like, what you don't like, what you believe, what you feel. Watch their response. And do that until you've got yourself clear about the enormous indifference with which the universe holds your opinion. If you do that honestly, and I know it's kind of funny, but if you do it honestly, really honestly, it'll cure you of being a windbag. You'll stop being a guy or gal in a diner. I invite you to contrast the enormous difference between the universe's concern for your opinion and your concern for your opinion. There might be some power to get on the side of the universe in this matter of your opinion. Really. Not only that, but I promise you that if you do this exercise and you do it honestly and authentically, that it will begin to reveal something with which you don't know that you don't know. When you begin to find out that the universe is profoundly and enormously indifferent to your opinion, to what you think and what you feel and what you believe, what you like, what you don't like, what you want, what you don't want, it begins to open up the question, well, what is it that the stars will move for? For what that I got would the stars will move? I say that that's missing. Like what we don't know that we don't know about that issue. Not only that, that isn't you thinking anyhow. It's it thinking. And it thinks these thoughts which you have, and you identify yourself as it. See, human beings are really strange kind of beings. My buddy has a dog, really wonderful dog, big dog. So he's easy to study. I've studied him at some length. And I see that he's very much like a human being in some ways. That is to say that he's got concerns. Like human beings have concerns. He's concerned with food, he's concerned with getting scratched behind the ear, he's got various concerns like human beings, but there's one concern with which the dog doesn't have, which is the all-consuming concern for the kind of being a human being is. So whatever kind of being a dog is it different than the kind of being that a human being is? I know that they're biologically different. I know they're theologically different. I know they're psychologically different. I'm concerned with the difference in being. So the dog is a being who has no concern, not no concerns, but he's damned concerned about food and getting scratched behind the ear, like many of us, like many of us. What's different is that he has no concern for his own identity, and you are only concerned with your own identity. That is to say that you never have a concern like a concern. It's always tied up with your own identity. You aren't ever even just hungry. It always tells you something about yourself. And every one of your concerns is really a concern for your own identity. When you're hungry, you're more interested in the I than the hunger. It's really appetite, obviously. Our appetites use us. You don't have an appetite, the appetite has you. Now, you stand, look, I didn't tell you that what I said was true, and I can hear you listening. You're listening. I don't think that's true. Nobody asked you. I'm inviting you to stand in the possibility, like a space, like an opening, like a clearing, stand in the possibility that you don't have an appetite. Your appetite has you. And for the most part, those things with which you are concerned, like I want, I like, I don't want, they are not your concerns. They are its concerns. And those concerns have you, you don't have them. Now, I'm inviting you to stand in that possibility and look out at your everyday way of being in the world. It is, I have a job, or is it that your job has you? Honestly. See, I don't want you to get the answer. I want you to look out from the possibility that our work, that our relationships, that our families, that our beliefs, that our wants and don't wants have us rather than the other way around. That's that it's not that you think, even that it thinks you think. It's really it thinks and you have the thoughts. It's not you feel, that's a superstition. I'm inviting you to consider the possibility that it feels and you have the feelings it feels. And those feelings use you. It is using your life. I didn't say that was true, so stop trying to figure out whether you agree. I'm inviting you to stand in the possibility that the being of human beings was here before you were ever thought of. It is an already set of options that lives in our languaging, in our culture, in our practice. That the being of human beings lives in our already set of options. There is no possibilities, just a set of options. Yes, my options may look different than your selection of options, your path through the options, and I may have something to do with which option I take because this being of human beings that is using us is an already set of options that it is using your life for what? And I don't care what you think the answer is. I'm asking you to stand in the question within this larger question. What kind of a being is a human being? I'm asking you to stand in the larger question. It is using your life for what? Now you notice what you think and all your opinions. You notice that that will come up for you. I'm asking you to put those aside for a moment and have courage to just to live in the question, like an open question, not like a question looking for an answer, not like a question with an answer, but like an open question. Stand in the question, stand in the space of the possibility, the opening, the clearing. It is using my life for what? Stand in there and look out at your everyday being in the world. Stand in that question and look out at you waking up in the morning. Look out at your getting ready for the day. Look out at your showing up wherever you show up during the day, whether it's in your home or in your office, with your children, with your spouse, with your friends. Look out from the question, from the opening, what is it using my life for? And look at your everyday being in the world. What is it using your life for? Again, I'm not questioning for an answer. We're not looking for information here. I'm inviting you to see what shows up, like a breaking open, like a certain freedom for being, like a possibility, like an empowerment in your everyday being in the world, standing in the possibility, in the clearing that these questions are, looking out at your everyday concerns, at your everyday being in the world. What is it using your life for in your relationships? And you see, that's interesting. If doing this, if you're doing the work, the cheap answers don't work, do they? If you stand inside the question of what is it using my life for, and you look into your relationships, it's not using your life for love. That doesn't come very easily there. You notice that the pad answers that to what you and I already know, and even what we know that we don't know, aren't very useful when we look in from certain possibilities, because we're not getting at what we're ordinarily interested in getting at. Please don't think that I don't think I didn't say you think I don't have options. I didn't think you don't have options. Please don't think I didn't say you think I don't have options. You do have options. I want to make a clear distinction between option and possibility. I said there is no possibility. I didn't say there weren't any options. When you showed up, human being was already a certain set of options, and you think and you feel and you speak and you act and you live in that set of options that was already there before you were even thought of. So that there is no possibility for human beings. There are only options within the possibility you'd inherited. If you travel on airplanes enough, you finally wind up reading the magazine, because eventually you've read everything else. And in the magazine, they have puzzles. And if you don't fly on airplanes that much, if you have children, your children bring home puzzles. One of the puzzles in all airplane magazines, in which all children bring home, is the puzzle of the 9 dots. This puzzle, so this is a puzzle in which there are 9 dots on a piece of paper or a blackboard, and your job is to connect the 9 dots. All 9 dots of them are with 4 straight lines without ever picking up your pencil from the page or the chalk from the chalkboard. So there are many options. So while there are many options for the attempt to connect the 9 dots with 4 straight lines without lifting the instrument from the surface, while there are many options, there are no possibility of doing it. Many options, no possibility, and whatever is using you. The options which it provides for you are the only game in town. What is it up to? What is that it's after? Why does it think the things it thinks? Why does it think those things which we have as thoughts? Why does it feel those things which we have as feelings? Why does it believe those things which we have as beliefs, as our beliefs? Why does it act in those ways which we wind up having as our actions? Why does it explain the actions it takes in the way in which it explains them, which we wind up with as explanations with which we have? Why does it like this and not like that? Why does it want this and not want that? What's it driving after? Where is it going? What is the possibility which it is, in which there isn't any outside of? There are only options in the possibility we inherited when we showed up as human beings. What is that all of the options add up to? So you see, it's one possibility with many options. One possibility is no possibility. There aren't any other possibilities than the one. There is no possibility. There are only options. Now, if you stand in that inside that possibility that I just shared with you, that there are no possibilities, there are only options, you will begin to see into the way we behave and why we behave like that. You'll begin to see why many of the problems in the age having been around since the beginning of humankind. Yes, we've got new options, but there are no possibilities. There are no possibilities. There are only options. If you take the board as the scope of the possibility of being for human beings and understand that being has a commitment, a thrust, it's not constructed in a way so as to, and wonder about what's it constructed in a way so as to what? You'll begin to see that while there are many places on the board that I can take the chalk, many options, and I can only be on the board. What is it? What is that board you showed up in? You see, I say that the quality of our lives, that our effectiveness with our daily concerns, our power we are in the world on our everyday basis is determined not by that to which we are paying attention, namely the circumstances, but it is determined by the box in which the circumstance comes. I say, and I'm asking you to consider like a possibility, not decide whether you agree. I say that the circumstances of a person's life don't determine the quality of that person's life. I say that the box that the circumstances come in has more power in terms of impact on a person's life than the circumstances themselves. I say that there's not much power in what you think. And if that's still hard for you to get like a possibility, again, I invite you out to the banks of the river about 3 or 4 in the morning on a clear night. You can see the indifference with which the universe has for what you think. I say the box in which you think, that set of options with which has you and determines what you may think, often even what you will think. I say that there's more power in that. For instance, for example, as evidence for my assertion, I know people whose circumstances are horrible, people with terminal illnesses who know that they're about to die, whose lives have more quality, more aliveness, whose lives are richer, who are themselves more alive than the people who case pass a physical at the doctors, who can pass. They've got more vitality, more aliveness than the so-called healthy people. I know lots of intelligent, well-educated, far more intelligent than others with whom I can contrast, far more educated, whose intelligence and education comes in a package of options such that they are less effective in the world than the less intelligent, less well-educated people. I say that the circumstances of your life have less to do with your effectiveness in life, less to do with your aliveness, less to do with your having an impact on life, less to do with the quality of your life than the set of options within which those circumstances showed up. That is to say, less you do with all of that than the interpretation, or rather the structure of interpretation, which you are, has to do with the quality of your life and your effectiveness in life. And I also say that you and I give almost no thought to that. We are very thoughtful about our circumstances, very thoughtful about the facts about ourselves and our lives, and we give almost no thought. In fact, we're unaware that we live in a structure of interpretation and an already set of options, and we only think what's allowed in that set of options. So if you stand over a maze and you put a rat at one end and there's food on the other end, there may be many ways through the maze, many ways of getting through the maze. And the rat has the sense of a lots of possibility, except when you stand over the maze and you look down, you can see while there are many options, you can go through the maze like this, you can go through it like that. There's no possibility. There's only the maze. What is the maze in which we showed up? You and I showed up as human beings. We showed up in the being of human beings. What is the being of a human being designed for? To what is it committed? Where is it going? What is it using your life for? And it is using your life. Its thoughts use your life. Its appetites, its I wants, its I likes, its I thinks, its I feels is using your life for what is it using your life? What is it using your life for? Can you forgo getting the answer right away and stand in the question? What is it that being, the being of human beings that I showed up in, what is it using my life for? You notice it gives you a totally different cast, a totally different view of your everyday being in the world, of your everyday interaction with your everyday concerns. So I want to suggest a possibility, something for you to try out like a possibility, that the 9 dots of being for human beings, the options, or really a set of all of the options for human beings, what each of those options lives inside of, like a set. The being of human beings is about survival, and what it's using your life for is survival. Now, you don't have to do anything with that for the moment. It's just the possibility. I want to take a look at another possibility, and then I want to put the two together. When you are that you are the identity I pointed at in the I think, when you are that you are it, the I pointed at the phrase I feel, I want, I like, I don't like. When you are that you are that, not when you think you are that, not when you believe you are that, because then it doesn't make any difference what you believe. Remember the stars? They don't move for that. When you are that, you are the identity I. When you are that, you are that, and you couple that with what's it up to, you get a very powerful look into how this what's up to is translated into our everyday being in the world, into our everyday engagement with our everyday concerns, what it's concerned with. Once you are that, you are it. Once you are that, you are the I pointed at in the phrase I think, I feel, I like, I don't like, then what it is up to is making you right. If I'm right and I'm making anything else by contrast wrong, what's using your life is using your life to make that which that you are, namely the identity, it is using your life to make sure that I dominate anything or anybody, and maybe just as important, I avoid domination of anybody or anything. It is using my life. It is using up my life to make sure that I win and that I avoid losing. It is using my feelings, my thoughts, my likes, my dislikes. It's using all of that to justify it and to invalidate anything which isn't it. So that's what it's using your life for. Now I'm inviting you to stand in that possibility. I didn't say it was true. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm asking you to stand in the possibility that that is what it uses your life for. The stand in the possibility that being that set of options in which you showed up, it is using your life, giving that you have identified yourself as your identity, the I in the phrase I think, that it is using your life to make you right and others wrong, to dominate and avoid domination of anything or anybody, to win and avoid losing, to justify it, and to validate anything else that isn't it. Uh, Invalidate anything else that isn't it. That's nasty medicine, isn't it? I said that this video wasn't about coming to grips with our own, was about coming to grips with our own inauthenticity, to at least be somewhat authentic about being about our own inauthenticity. That's pretty nasty news. And I know that the first thing that you will do when you hear about that is attempt to avoid the domination of that possibility. That's it, at work. The thoughts that you just had, that couldn't be true, all those thoughts about yes, but, and how about, and what if, and that's it at work. See, lots of people, their whole lives attempting, you see, there's lots of people their whole lives attempting to avoid domination of the ruthless rules of reality. They're called seekers. They seek to get out of this trap of survival. They want to be free of this trap of survival. The problem is that the attempt to get out of the trap is the trap. You see, you attempt to avoid the domination of it is being dominated by it. See, I know that when we have this kind of discussion, people on the way to your next thing, you'll be driving home or driving to work, and they'll be talking about what happened in this video. And the conversation, you'll all of a sudden notice that you're trying to be right. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to be right. And the first thing you'll do when you notice that you're trying to be right is you'll try to stop being right in order to be right about not being right. See, I know that no matter how many times I say at the beginning of this video about giving up trying to hide our inauthenticity, no matter how many times I speak at the beginning of the video about not trying to get an answer about that, using the video to get better, about not using the video to get a solution, about not using the video to improve yourself, no matter how many times I say that, no matter what we're about, you stick in the mall called how can I be better and improve myself? So in fact, you begin to discover the power of your own inauthenticity has on you, the power that it has, the force that it has exercises. You begin to discover that the first thing people want to do is avoid it. But that's more of it. Now, or no, you will. If you were working tonight, if you're working in this video, begin to notice when standing in this possibility that your life is being used by it, and what it's using your life for is to make that which you've identified yourself as to avoid its being dominated by anything or anybody. When you stand in that possibility, you have some very deep insights into life, into your own life. I say that there's enormous power in being authentic about our own inauthenticity. I say that there's real power, and that power shows up in our everyday being in the world, like practical, hard-headed impact on our effectiveness and on the quality of our living. I say that there's that kind of impact for those people who will live with the possibility. I didn't say believe it or that it was true. I say live with the possibility. Look, the thing I want to give you an opportunity to consider when is what happens when you cover up. When one covers up the way one is, what happens to us when we cover up the way we are, when we're unwilling to consider or be with our own inauthenticity, when we cover up our own inauthenticity, when we cover up this kind of being used, this is what our lives are being used for. I want to give you an opportunity to consider what happens, and I want to give you an opportunity to consider it deeply and profoundly. There's a kind of resignation which occurs, a being stuck with this being used by when we're unwilling to take a look at it. The single most powerful characteristic about beings for human about human beings, for those people who actually look at and come to engage with the question in which we're engaged in this video, is this aspect of covering up and resignation that goes with it. When you cover up the options which are using you, you've really resigned yourself to those options. And I'm asking you to take a look at that for yourself, that when you're being used, if you cover up being used, you're resigned to the being used. So the very struggle against the unwillingness to look at our own being and used leaves us with a kind of resignation to those options which are using us. It's only in coming to confront our own inauthenticity, only coming to confront that it isn't we who are thinking, but it is it which thinks, and we have the thoughts. It's only in confronting that it isn't we who feel, but it who feels, and we have the feelings that it feels, that you're presented with anything other than the resignation. So there's a very strange thing going on in the interaction between us and what we're considering here. In one way, we're being invited to consider that we live in this trap of being in which we showed up as being, and in the normal course of events, we resisted that with all of our might. We tried to avoid it, try to get away from it, try to keep demonstrating to ourselves that we've got some choice in the matter. Again, I make the distinction between choice and options. I know you've got lots of options, but I'm saying that there's no choice. We've only got the possibility which we inherited, the possibility into which we were thrown. We're thrown to be this particular way. We're thrown into this kind of being that has a particular set of options. I know that I'm asking you to confront the inauthenticity which we are, the lack of possibility which we are, and I know it screams against it. It wants to avoid any recognition of its own mechanism, of the mechanism which it is. But in our own avoiding, coming to grips with our own inauthenticity, we really resign ourselves to the inauthenticity, the cover up, the struggle to avoid, the trying to get away, the convincing ourselves that we've got choices. All of that leaves us res all of that leaves us resigned to the options that are using us. The whole cover up, the whole attempt to avoid the discomfort, the embarrassment, whatever it is for you, that confronting this kind of authenticity is. That leaves you resigned to the inauthenticity. The cover up itself leaves a person resigned. And if you're with human beings, just like being with them, you'll begin to see this profound kind of resignation that we are. If you stand, or we were, if you stand in the possibility of this resignation to these options, which are using us, put this all in the past tense, we're using us. If you stand up, we cover up with our franticness, with our attempts to look good, with all those ways which we cover up. You'll begin to see a deep resignation, this kind of mood resignation, which people are. And look, I want you to understand exactly what I mean by mood of resignation. I mean that environment of being into which you wake up in the morning. Don't mean something like what you see in a mental institution. I mean that environment of being into which you and I wake up in the morning, that waking up more tired than we were when we went to bed, that waking up to no sense of freedom, no sense of possibility, no sense of openness, no sense of opportunity, no sense of real joy. When I talk about the resignation with which we are, or which we are, I'm talking about that mood, if you like, that environment of being which encapsulates us from the time that we wake up. When you are with other people in a meeting, stand back for a moment and take a look at the environment of being which is available to them. Is there any sense of possibility? Are they thinking? Are they feeling? Are they speaking out of the sense of possibility of life, out of the privilege which it is to be alive? Or are they speaking out of this resignation, which I'm asking you to confront that we are, this resignation to the options that own us? I say that the resignation, which is the environment of being in which we live, that resignation is held in place by our addiction to looking good, but by our absolute unwillingness to confront our own inauthenticity. And by inauthenticity, what I mean is that our lives are being used for the survival of the identity of the I which is at pointed at in the I think, that our lives are being used for making ourselves right and others wrong. I will bet that every complaint in your life really represents a scheme that you have about which you are complaining in your life, because somehow it makes you right. You watch the people use their illnesses, you watch the complaints that people have about their work, about their jobs. Most complaints about work, about their jobs are in a way, a scheme in which enables them to avoid the domination of their job like an opportunity. See if your job showed up like an opportunity, like a possibility of making a difference, like the possibility of making a contribution. If your job showed up like a space of freedom in which to express everything that you had, everything that you were, then you'd have to be responsible for the opportunity your job is. But as long as you can say they, it, the boss, and the circumstances of your job, and they don't listen, I say that that's a scheme. And I'm inviting you to take a look at your complaints like a scheme. The complaints about your work, for the most of us, help us to avoid domination, help us to avoid the responsibility, the opportunity with which work is. You and I know in our relationship, you're saving something. You don't give everything you've got. You're saving a little bit because someday the guy's going to come on the white horse. And when the guy comes on the white horse, then you're going to give everything, but not to him, not to her. No, they don't understand you. They don't. Fill in your own complaint. But I say that that lets you off the hook. That helps you avoid the domination of the responsibility of holding your relationship as an opportunity to express yourself fully and totally. You see, if only she fill in the blank, that's your scheme. And when we get authentic about the kind of beings that we are, the kind of being that we see ourselves to be, what when we want to be authentic about it is a racketeer and the scheme of whatever you're complaining about. You're too old. Being too old is a scheme. I had the privilege of a very close relationship with a man who was 84 when I was working with him. Bucky Fuller was anything but an old man at 84. Yes, he had certain constraints that his body, his age had put on his actions, but they did not show up like a scheme for Bucky. They didn't keep him from being fully and totally and absolutely alive. So I'm inviting you to stand in the possibility that if you want to be authentic about yourself and an take an honest look, what you're going to see is a racketeer. And that's what life's about. The being of human being leaves human beings as racketeers. We've got this scheme, and all racketeers, when expect a payoff, when all racketeers, we expect a payoff of the scheme. The payoff is what we got to be right. Your scheme lets you be right, or it allows you to make somebody wrong. Lots of people in their 60s are still making their parents wrong, still making their upbringing wrong. People would rather be right in their relationships than love. You know what he did? Whatever he did is more important than love. You stand in that possibility now. No, I know it's not your relationship we're talking about, but you stand in that possibility. Look out at your relationships, at your friends, of your friends. You see, looking out from the possibility that you would exchange being right about what he did or she did. You would exchange that for love. They would, your friends. Our unwillingness to come to grips with the essential nature of being for human beings leaves us living a resignation to the options which use us and are spending our lives covering up what we're being used. And it's the cover up that we're being used, the cover up that our lives are devoid of possibility, are only present us with options. It's the covering up which ensures that we'll be stuck in the resignations of those options. I know this, it isn't pretty. What I'm telling you isn't pretty what I'm telling you. And I know that if you're like most people, you're sitting there figuring out a way that it's not true about you, or at least that it's not always true about you. Life is a scheme, and you and I are racketeers. And if you go if you can get beyond the horror of that and just be with the is of it, I say that there's power in that. And you have to see whether what I say turns out to be so. I'm talking about the possibility that accepting your own deep, profound inauthenticity, accepting that that your life is being used by it. I'm saying by accepting that, not like the truth, not like something you believe, but accepting it as a possibility in which you are willing to stand and look out at your everyday being in the world and your engagement with your everyday concerns. I'm saying that the acceptance of that inauthenticity will lead to a breaking open up of the resignation which you are, the resignation of the environment of being into which you wake up when you wake up in the morning, the day by day at this petty pace about which Shakespeare spoke. No, like a set of circumstances. Because I know you've got a lot of titillating circumstances in your life, but like a move about which one lives. I know how to put on a good face. I know how to look good, and I know you know how to look good. And television and most of what we consider to be public about looking good. And if you look out from the possibility of your own life is about looking good, you're going to see that a hell of a lot of what you're up to is about looking good. You don't mean it, and sometimes you know you don't mean it. You don't even believe the things you believe in, and sometimes you know you don't believe in them, but you keep looking good about it. You're afraid to express your own doubts for fear of not looking good. And again, while I don't profess to be telling the truth, I'm not a guy in a diner. So I'm inviting you to look out from the possibility that you are or were a racketeer, that your relationships must be are, because it keeps continuing as you grow, that your relationships and your work, your job, the things in your life are really about getting these payoffs. And the best place to look is those things about which you're complaining in life. Oh, there you go. You're not complaining, then you don't have the racketeer. I don't want. You see, you and I are willing to sacrifice the quality of our life for these payoffs. Like I said, in our relationships, we are willing to sacrifice love. I mean, the real presence of love. Like maybe you can remember we're willing to sacrifice that being right, making the other person wrong. We're willing to sacrifice that to dominate the other person, to manipulate them, to get them to be the way we want them to be and avoid any manipulation or domination from them. We're willing to sacrifice love in order to win, to avoid loss. We're willing to sacrifice love in order to justify it to ourselves. If any inkling of an opening for generosity shows up in a relationship, we close it down quickly in order to keep ourselves justified in the position that we're in. We're willing to give up, to sacrifice our own self-expression. See on our tombstone what they're going to put on your tombstone. When you die, something was left and we don't know what it is or was. See, you're not going to put on your tombstone used up because you're not going to get used up. Nah, you're going to save it till Prince Charming comes. Then you're going to give it, then you're going to give it. But now, not here, not for this, not for what you got, not for what you got. Most people are going to their grave with this sense that there was something in them that never got expressed, that there was something there, something of real value, something that could make a difference, something that could have been a contribution that just never got expressed. And most of us are going to go to our grave like that. Because you see, we're willing to sacrifice being used. I don't mean being used like I was speaking about before. I mean being used by being used. I mean, by being used, I mean using ourselves. Most of us are willing to sacrifice your own full self-expression for the avoidance of responsibility, to avoid the domination of taking on life like an opportunity. Most people are happy to give up their happiness. People don't have any problem sacrificing their happiness, not as long as they can be right. You see, I say any place in your life where you are unhappy, I'll bet that right there, you're being right or making somebody or something else wrong. You've exchanged your own happiness for being right or making somebody or something else wrong. Okay, it isn't you anyhow. It's it. You're just along for the ride. You're just being used. What I'm asking you to do is start confronting, to be in a place, the possibility, looking out at your life, in that possibility, looking at out at your own life to see that that's what it is using your life for, that it is willing to sacrifice love, vitality, happiness, and self-expression. You see, I know you want to be happy. You aren't, but you want to be. I'll just share one little tip with you. And I told you I don't give tips. I said I don't have answers or solutions or prescriptions. Here's one little tip. You aren't ever going to get happy. Ever. I promise. I know you know all the fairy tales and stories, and I know you intoxicate yourself with romantic sensations that someday you're going to be happy as soon as X. Then you're going to be happy. I promise that you will never get happy. That's a promise. The pursuit of happiness is the only guarantee against it. By accident, almost anything else might leave you happy, but the pursuit of happiness is an absolute sure guarantee against happiness. So I can very comfortably promise you that you're never going to get happy. No, it will sacrifice your happiness for that. And you will cover up that is what is happening. You will cover it up for yourself. You will cover it up from others, and that cover up will ensure that you live in an environment of resignation to the options which are using you. And our life will be a very clever strategy at best. If you're real good at it, you won't know that. You're very, very good at it. You won't even know that you don't know it. See, the cost for those things is always our aliveness. That's what it sacrifices in order to accomplish that. Now, human beings, I told you that the kind of being that a human being is different than the kind of being a dog is. That's a fairly safe statement. I told you that one of the things about the being that human beings are is that that being is very concerned for your identity. The dog has no concern for his identity. Sometimes by interacting with human beings, you can get the dog a little bit concerned about his identity. Makes him very crazy. Then they start to be psychological like human beings are. It's interesting, but it's true. Some of you've got dogs that are hung up on love like you are. Well, the other aspect of being for human beings is that aspect of making up meaning. It's kind of like a thunderstorm. If there's a thunderstorm, thunderstorms are very unpredictable. Anybody who reads the newspaper or watches television, you know the weather part of it, and you know that thunderstorms are unpredictable. I mean, they can do certain amount of predicting, like you can about human beings, but for the most part, thunderstorms are unpredictable, like human beings are. It's a certain range which you can predict, but then they somehow turn out to be somewhat unpredictable. Thunderstorms and human beings are very much alike, except for one thing. Thunderstorms don't talk, and human beings talk. And what they talk about when they talk about the thunderstorm, which they are, is they talk meaning. See, it's kind of like a thunderstorm when there's a thunderstorm and you say the thunderstorm is evil. The thunderstorm is up to no good. No thunderstorm, no, the thunderstorm is watering the little plants. Ah, isn't that sweet? The thunderstorm is watering the little plants so that spring can come again and life can be renewed. If you stand back from yourself far enough, you'll see that you are very much like a thunderstorm. You are a mechanism, very much like a thunderstorm. It's true that you're not very predictable, except with certain limits, like thunderstorms is predictable within certain limits, but not totally predictable. But you're a thunderstorm with a mouth. That is to say, you give meaning to the direction and the actions of the thunderstorm, when in fact, the directions and actions of the thunderstorm, while not entirely predictable, are nevertheless very mechanical. You see, a thunderstorm is a mechanism. That is to say, it has no purpose, it has no meaning, it isn't going anyplace, it isn't trying to do something, it's not trying to create a flood or water the little plants. This survival is like a description that the thunderstorm reigns. And the being of human beings, there is survival. The only difference is that the kind of being a human being are, unlike the thunderstorm, they can attach meaning to all of this. I say this is devoid of meaning. It doesn't mean anything that it is about being right. That's just the way it is. See, if you're feeling badly about having your life being used for something making you right and others wrong, and so forth and so on, if you're feeling badly about that, that's you ascribing meaning to the thunderstorm. You told this one to you told this 1 to 3 minute soap opera of your thunderstorm. You've got the little plants. Ah, isn't that sweet? You see, you add the story that is watering the land, and you are just being used for survival. It is using you for survival. It doesn't mean anything that it's using you for that. It just is. When I asked you to consider the possibility that your life has no meaning and no purpose, you can't tolerate that notion. I mean, you can't even consider the possibility. You can't consider the possibility that your life has as much meaning and as much purpose as a thunderstorm. Yes, it's very interesting. And there's all kinds of things happening in a thunderstorm. I mean, really, they're wonderful, but they don't have any meaning and they aren't going anywhere like a purpose. It's it's true that they are wonderfully unpredictable within limits. And it's true that we're getting better at predicting them, like we are about you. But the thunderstorm can't add meaning to what's happening, and you can. And in adding meaning, you cover up the inauthenticity of the being of human beings. The being of human beings is fundamentally inauthentic. That is to say, it is a being used by being. It's like you are a spear carrier in an opera that you made up. Lots of you are spear carriers in other people's operas, which is even worse. The being of human beings is a mechanism, the end of which, the purpose or design function of which is survival. See, now you can't hear it because you know it's going to work out. You're just sure it's going to work out. It isn't going to work out, really. It is not going to work out. This is all there is. This, what you got, is what there is. Never mind the fairy tales. This is it. It is not going to work out because it has already worked out. This is the way it worked out. You don't like that? Too bad. The knight in shining armor is not going to ride into your living room and carry you off, so you better stop saving it. You better give it up now. More importantly, to come to grips with our own fundamental inauthenticity begins to alter the mood of being in which we live. From one of resignation to one of a kind of authenticity or honesty about the inauthenticity which we are. One begins to wake up in an environment of being that has a certain quality of authenticity which no one covering up this ever knows about. I didn't say that was true. I said that I'm not a guy in a diner. And I meant what I said. And I'm asking you to stand in the possibility of what I said and look out at our everyday way of being in the world. I'm not asking you to surrender or give into it. The being of human beings, the being which is using you, no. I'm asking you to confront it, to accept it. Not like give in or surrender, but accept as in be with. All that noise in your life, all that chatter in the back of your head, all that evaluation and judgment and assessment, the whole story in which you are a player in the script called life. I'm asking you to consider fundamental inauthenticity of that. That is very much like a thunderstorm to which I have added this great fantasy, this great story, this great soap opera. Maybe it doesn't mean anything when you're sad. Maybe you're just sad. Maybe it doesn't mean anything more than it means when it rains hard outside. Oh, I know you think it's out to get you. Really, you do. You even complain about it. It's like kicking in your windshield when you have a flat. Maybe it really doesn't mean anything. And maybe that isn't sad either, because maybe that doesn't mean anything either. See, maybe it doesn't mean anything that it doesn't mean anything. I know you're fighting against it because you think that it means something that it doesn't mean anything. You showed up as human being. That's the total set of options. That's the being of human beings, like what you inherited. That's our inheritance. And we're all wanting for it to turn out. And it's not going to turn out. This really is it. There's no hidden meanings. There are no secrets being kept from you. It isn't going to turn out. It isn't going to get better. It gets better and it gets worse and it gets better and it gets worse as we thrash around amongst the options. But remember, the box in which the options comes determines the quality of living, not which option you choose. I know you think your option is right. You chose the right option. You got it figured out. You got it made. Okay, I accept you did. The only problem is that it's all in that box. And in that box, there is no being, none. There's right, wrong, dominate, avoid domination, win, lose, justify, invalidate. So don't fool yourself about having a choice. Yes, I grant that you've got options, but no choice. By the way, when I say this is it, I don't mean that nonsensical stuff about be here now or let it all hang out. When I say that life doesn't have meaning, that you are devoid of meaning, devoid of purpose, you're a thunderstorm with a lot of conversation about meaning and purpose to which you are very engaged. Some people want to use that as a justification for something. If you use that as a justification for something, then you don't get it. That's it's meaningless and empty is not a justification for not doing anything. That it's meaningless and empty is meaningless and empty. You can't use it. If if you do use it, if you make and therefore a prescription, if you make a therefore or a prescription, a therefore or a prescription or a justification out of it, you didn't get it. It doesn't mean anything that it doesn't mean anything. It's empty that it's empty. And remember, I didn't say that it was true. I know you think it's an alternative thing to believe. I say it's a possibility in which to stand and look at life, look out at life. Now, like I said, we've only got 3.5 hours. I don't know how long this has been. We can't get into these things to the depth with which I would get into them if we had the time. There's a much bigger possibility here. This is designed to give you a taste of the real thing that's different than being told about it. You know, when you taste a banana split, bananas Foster, it's different than being told about a banana split or Foster. But a taste of a banana split is also different than eating the whole banana split. So this is a taste of the form or of the work of the form. It's a taste. We want to take a look from a slightly different perspective. Let's see. We talked about is earlier. We said that when we live those use us. A black cat is unlucky that uses you. We said that it is thought that a black cat is unlucky will use you less. Black cats being unlucky is a superstition that will use you very little and will leave you with the freedom to be. So, in this investigation of the being of human beings, I want to talk about what shows, want to talk about not what shows up like a circumstances of life, of your life. See, people always think if you don't know me, that is to say, if you don't know any of my circumstances, if you don't know my real story, if you don't know what's happening in my life, how can you say anything of value to me? You don't know me. I know you're very attached to your own story, like it's who you are, but I'm really more interested in the box in which your story shows up. I'm really more interested in the context in which your circumstances live. So I want to investigate with you, take a look at with you the boxes you inherited when you showed up as a human being. The domains of showing up rather than what shows up, the domains of showing up for the circumstances and the story of your life, the domain of showing up for the feelings and thoughts and so on and so forth. So thoughts and so on and so forth of your life. When you show up as a human being, what kind of showing up opportunities are there? Well, let's use as an example of the person with whom you live. You go home and you say, I love you. What we should say when we go home is, I live in the concept I love you, and I measure my feelings against my concept of love. And if my feelings match my concepts of love, then I feel about my love for you. And if my feelings at the moment don't match my concepts of love, then I begin to doubt my love for you. I live in the concept of I love you, concept I love you, and examine my actions. And when my actions match my concept of love, I feel good about what I've done. And when my actions don't match my concepts of love, I feel guilty about what I've done. I live in the concept I love you, and I know that I'm living the concept I love you because I can remember, most of us, I can remember living in the presence of my love for you. And the presence of love is distinct from the concept of love. And by contrasting the two, I can see that it would really be right to say that I live in the concept I love you. And every once in a while, uh, but not often in the presence of my love for you. Now, I know that's real enough for you to follow, and it's all right with me if you think that what I just said is not true about you, but everybody else. It's not true about you, but everybody else. So that demonstrates, because we don't have the time to go in any more deeply, that there are domains of showing up that are distinct from another, in which X can show up in one domain, and X and the same X can show up in a different domain. We can have love as a presence and love as a concept. It's the same stuff. It's love. But please notice how different the impact is on the quality of our living between love is a presence and love is a concept. Now, I picked a subject, namely love, which is easy to talk about because, again, we have very little time, but I'm saying that the kind of being a human being is, when you showed up, a human being, you had available to you two domains of distinctions, two ontological domains, two domains of showing up, in which life could show up as an experience and life could show up as a representation of experience. I say the kind of being that human beings are loses their inheritance, so that they lose the distinction between these two domains of showing up. And life neither shows up discreetly as an experience, as a presence, nor does it show up as a concept, as a representation, but that the two collapsed together, where in life it doesn't show up at all. We, in a collapse of domains, often showing up, our experience always devolves in memory. That is to say, that the representation of our experience, our memories, our concepts, our descriptions of life, which is not life, but a description of this, our definitions, which is not that which is being defined, namely, not presence or explanations or justifications or rationalizations, shape our experience. So that rather our experience something different, rather than experience something directly, like an opening, in an opening, you and I experience to the already structures of an interpretation, namely our structures of concepts. A conceptually shaped experience reinforces the concept that shapes it. The reinforced concept more fully shapes the concept, the experience. The more fully shaped experience reinforces the concept some more, and it goes around and around like this cycle. That cycle is what you and I live into. I say that you and I live into a ferocious cycle. What is before us is not our past, like a history, although many people use that interpretation. Rather, what is before us is this ineffective cycle of the collapse of these two domains, in which there is no distinction between what is and my representation of what is, in which there is no distinction between the presence and the concept of the things in our lives that we live into. What goes inside of us, the space into which we live our lives, is this ferocious cycle. Now, there's something very powerful about just that. If you just restore the distinctions that you inherited as a human being so that life can show up when it is present as a presence, and life can show up when it is being represented or conceptual as a concept. You see, I want to be very, very, very clear that I'm not talking about getting rid of concepts. I'm talking about I'm not talking about irrational. I'm not talking I'm not talking about something anti-intellectual. That is, for me, like cutting off half of yourself. No, there's a richness and a power and a validity and a value in our concepts, in our descriptions of life, in our stories about life, but not when they're confused with the presence of life. And for most part, most people have fallen into the collapse of these domains of distinction. So just like a possibility, stand in the possibility that your life no longer shows up for you like a distinction, that you are no longer living in the distinction between presence and concept, that there are two, that the two are kind of mashed together, and that into which we live, your life is this collapse of distinctions, which I've called for a ferocious cycle. Take, for example, looking out from that possibility, that's your relationship, at your relationships, that you are living into a future built like this. I don't mean in terms of the circumstances, because you can put any circumstances in here, but in terms of the possibility of it, what is possible in the ferocious cycle? That's hard. Let me give you another example. There's this guy by the name of Diogenes who lived in a barrel and carried a lantern around looking for an honest man. He died without finding one. I don't live in a barrel and I don't carry a lantern. And I'm not looking for an honest man. I'm looking for someone who was late. And I never found anybody who was late. I've never found anybody who's been late. People, can you believe that? I've never found anyone that is late, just late. People are always late because you see, like presence, like a presence. When you're late, and that's all, period. And if you want to look for a cause in the domain of presence, then you're late because you're late, like a presence. Now, it's also valid that you forgot. I forgot. I'm late because I forgot. It's true that you forgot. Nobody's saying that you didn't forget. You did forget. But I forgot lives in a different domain of showing up than I'm late. See, if you're late and you remembered, notice there's no difference in terms of impact than if you're late and you forgot. You don't notice that. You think it's different if you're late and you forgot than if you're late and you remembered. And you live in a culture which doesn't know the difference either. It wants to know why you're late. So I picked a fairly trivial thing to invite you to restore for yourself this distinction, to restore for yourself the domain of showing up. Not like that's true, but like a possibility, like standing in the possibility of your life, your relationships, your work as your concerns in the world, showing up like a presence and having that distinct from the story you tell about it, from the description, from the justification, the rationalizations, the excuses, the explanations, so that you've got some room for life to show up just like that. Now, the reason I bring it up because it has something very powerful to do with what kind of a being that a human beings have fallen to be. I bring it up so that you can look from the possibility that you're living into a box called a ferocious circle, where the story of your life is really that into which you are living your life, where the story you tell about yourself is really that space into which you are living your life, that you're living into. This ferocious circle, where the story and the presence of life, where the concepts and the rationalizations and justifications and the experience of life are really kind of jammed together. And I'm suggesting to you that no matter how clever you are, no matter what circumstances you put in the ferocious cycle, what you're going to get out of it is what you can get out of a ferocious circle in terms of your own effectiveness. And in terms of your quality of life, now a very strange thing happens when you push this question. What kind of being is a human being? When you push it really hard. Now, we've only half done that a little bit in this video. We've kind of tapped at it across a fairly broad spectrum, covering a lot of ground. We haven't been able to go very deeply, but we've been able to go fairly extensively into the kind of being that a human being is. And if you can confront your own inauthenticity, once you can be with your own inauthenticity, the resignation to the inauthenticity begins to break up and a question arises. Now, that question is around all the time, like a defense, like a way to survive. People are always in some form or another asking about possibility and what choices do I have? What can I do with my life? And what should I be doing with my life? And what can I do with my life? And was it right? Was it wrong? Listen to the question. What is the possibility of being, like a capital B? What is the possibility of being for human beings? Asked against the background of being inauthentic about your own inauthenticity. Asked in this environment of being, which is called resignation. Ask in the space of the cover-up of our own inauthenticity is always more of our inauthenticity. It's always more of a survival ploy, always more of a survival strategy. There are lots of answers to the question, what is the possibility of being for human beings? And almost none of the answers makes any real difference in people's everyday being in the world. Now, I told you that this work, what we call distinctions that we do in the forum, a taste of which we're giving you in this video as a way of engaging in these questions that are at the heart of the matter of being for human beings, such that the engaging in the inquiry, the questioning shows up people's everyday being in the world as kind of a breaking open for them. You'll find yourself, I promise, through the things you go through every day, and suddenly there'll be a bit of a breaking open here. There'll be a sense of freedom where earlier there were only a given set of options about which you needed to be clever. Suddenly, there'll be a breaking open of freedom to be with that which you couldn't be with very well before. Someplace else in your life, there will be a sense of being able to be with something that was kind of crowding you, something that was pushing you, something that was confronting you. Just by the virtue of this inquiry, not because you've found a prescription, not because you got the answer, not because you know the recipe, not because you've got the solution, just by virtue of this special way of inquiring into these questions. Just by having been here, there'll be a certain empowerment in the face of the real risk that being alive is. And you'll find that happening. You'll try to dominate the ruthless rules of reality or avoid domination of the insights that you find. However, if you really push this question, which we've been addressing tonight, that is the being of human being, it brings you authentically out the other side. At the end of it, like the beginning of something, whereas the beginning is a question, namely, what is the possibility of being for human beings? Now, I don't suppose that that's happened to you very naturally in this video, because as I said, we're going to do it in 3.5 hours, whatever this is, what we've been working on since the beginning of civilization. But I say that it happens very naturally. When you cover the ground authentically, when you start to live with your own inauthenticity and not ask the question as whether ploy to try as another ploy to try to avoid your own inauthenticity, but just asking the question like a possibility, what is the possibility of being for human beings? Well, the first thing that comes up when you ask that question, what is the possibility for being for human beings? The answer that comes up, the first thing that comes up, there isn't any possibility of being for human beings. And if you don't get to that, you don't get any farther. There just isn't any possibility of being for human beings. What you showed up in did not include being. It isn't interested in being. It has nothing to do with being. It is only concerned with survival. So there is no possibility of being for human beings, and that's a part of being authentic about your own inauthenticity. And if you can really be with that, and I doubt you can be fully, if you can be with the emptiness and meaninglessness, which you are, if you can be with the emptiness and meaningless of life as a thunderstorm about which we tell a story, the kind of thunderstorm, that kind of thunderstorm, suddenly the emptiness and meaninglessness, when it's lost its meaning, and that empty and meaningless suddenly becomes a clearing in which to stand and look out for the possibility of being for human beings. You see, that which starts out as a threat becomes an opening, a clearing, when you can be with it authentically. If you're being with it authentically, you're clear that there is no possibility of being for human beings. Now, what do good human beings do in that situation? What would a good human being do? All the good human beings, you, what would you do about it? You would change it. That's what you would do about it. You would change it without ever recognizing that change is something from something. You see, change is something which comes from or is made from something, but there is no possibility of being for human beings. So change won't work, because change only alters the circumstances in the ferocious cycle, only becomes another form of survival. Creation is something from nothing, from the no possibility of being for human beings, from the emptiness and meaninglessness of the thunderstorm which we are, from that emptiness and meaninglessness, from that no possibility, out of nothing, something really, really. Have you got anything in your whole life which isn't predicated on something? No, you haven't got anything in your whole life that isn't a predicate. which isn't predicated on something. Everything in our lives is a derivative. We're always living into the options, and to create is to act without predicate, to act from nothing. What is it for a human being to act from yourself, the emptiness and meaninglessness of this very enticing thunderstorm that you are? Now you'll notice that I haven't changed anything, the inauthenticity which we are. I'm simply showing you that being authentic about your own inauthenticity opens up like a question in a very natural way. The possibility of being for human beings, and without the foundation of being authentic about your own inauthenticity. The question is just another clever dodge in the issue of our survival, even if you restore the distinction. So when life shows up for you like a concept, and when life is present, it can show up for you like a presence, like a distinction between the two, so that they can show up as they are. Even then, there's no being here. You'll notice the rest of the board is blank because there isn't anything there. And if anything will be there, it will have to be there as an act of existential courage. That is to say, as an act without any basis, without any propping, without any support, without any rationale, justification, or explanation, something like the Weber's, something like what Weber's talking about when he says, "Here I stand." Now, for those of you that think what I'm saying is some kind of mystical hocus pocus, I want to be clear with you, it is not. That this is rigorous and accountable, in that a domain of being predicated on nothing would demonstrate its validity in the actions which are derived from it, and in the alteration on nothing, alteration of the circumstances with which those actions provide. By the same token, if you're thinking that I'm saying that being can be evidence, it cannot. There is neither a predication for nor evidence of being. Being, capital B, or more rigorously, the possibility of being for human beings, could be said being like a possibility, being as itself. Not being like a presence, not being like a concept, but being as itself could be said to be the stand that I am, the stand I take. Being, like the possibility of being, could be said to be the stand is the stand I take. In other words, the possibility of being, as where by being we mean possibility. So I know this is hard, but to say it accurately, the possibility of possibility, not the possibility of an option, not something derivative, not in the sense to which you are already resigned, not to which it is using you, but the possibility of possibility, not an option, not a strategy, not a new maneuver, not a change, no, not a change, but a possibility. The possibility of possibility is a product of taking a stand for the possibility of being a stand to take, the stand you take, being the stand you take. Whether the stand which you are is a clearing for that for which you stand. We started out by talking about you, that you are the I, and I think, I feel, I believe, and I suggest to you that out of the banks of the Potomac at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on a clear night, you look up and see what concerns the universe has for the you which you are, that you are, And in a very subtle way, I invited you to the possibility of yourself as emptiness and meaninglessness, in which possibility, if you engage in it authentically, you'll begin to see that that empty and meaninglessness or meaningless, that empty and meaningless is also a clearing for maybe you aren't that which you pointed to in the phrase I like, I want, I think. Maybe you're the kind of nothing, the kind of empty, the kind of meaninglessness, the kind of not going anywhere, the kind of emptiness and meaninglessness of which is a clearing for your life to show up like a possibility, show up in like a possibility, like something from nothing. Yes, against the background of culture and practices and languaging, certainly, always against that background. I'm inviting you to consider the possibility of being that as the possibility of taking a stand for your being, the stand that you take. I'm inviting you to stand in the possibility that your life could be lived into possibility, like into the stand which you are, where the stand becomes a clearing, an opening, a freedom, a possibility for that which you stand, rather than living into the options of the ferocious circle. Now you'll notice I want I won't get very far in this. Again, I said a taste, but a taste is enough. The invitation here is to live in the question, what is the possibility for being for human beings? Not like a way to survive, but like an opening, like a possibility. You see, I'm afraid that you keep listening possibility like options. I'm talking about outside the nine dots. I'm talking about outside the options which are using us. While being authentic about being unauthentic, being used by those options, I am inviting you to create question, a question into which to live your life. I say people live their lives into that ferocious cycle. They live their lives into the past. They live their lives into resignation of the options which are using them. I'm inviting you, given that you've now perhaps recognized as superstitions, some of the superstitions that were using you, I'm inviting you to create a question like an opening, not like looking for an answer, but like an opening. I'm inviting you to create a question into which to live your life, a question into which your everyday concerns show up in that question. Same everyday concerns you've always had, but now instead of showing up in the resignation of the options, I'm inviting you to the other promise in distinctions besides these openings, besides these freedoms, a way like being in power, a question that gives direction into your living, where the everyday concerns and your everyday being in the world are the material with which you're asking the question. To live into such a question is to live, is not to live into resignation, into which we wake up. Please notice I haven't recommended that you have a new belief which wakes you up. Rather, I've invited you to create a question out in front of your life into which you can live your life, in which question, like a possibility, like an opening, not a question looking for an answer, but like a question, like a possibility, like an opening in which your everyday being in the world can show up and your everyday concerns for living can show up. So that's the front of the hand, or front of the hand. And the back of the hand, distinctions. The front of the hand is to engage in these questions in such a way that they show up as breaking opens freedoms, empowerment in the face of your everyday concerns, your everyday being in the world. The other side of the possibility of the distinction is to create a space for yourself in which to live that aliveness you're living that allows you to live in a possibility instead of a set of options. Now, I know it's a little frightening in actually doing it. You see, if you stand in front of a blank canvas, you can create, and standing in front of a blank canvas is frightening. Most people are way more comfortable living the strategies which the options present for them. It takes courage to live into the opening of a question, and it enlightens the quality of one's life in very practical, hard-headed, being effective in the world ways. And in addition, an opening up like life as a possibility rather than as a given set of options. So I'm leaving you in front of a blank canvas. I'm not leaving you with a message. I'm not leaving you with an answer. I'm not leaving you with a prescription. I'm not leaving you any better than you were when you started this video. I'm not leaving you improved. I'm leaving you with a blank canvas, with an invitation. What we're talking about is a little bit like an example I want to give you out of evolution. We're told that life began in a bit of a protoplasm in a tropical sea, and you add eons of time, you get life over the sea and various forms, and so forth and so forth, and so on and so forth. Just on. That's what we're told. We're told that life in the sea has evolved to cover every niche and cranny of the sea. There's life all over the sea, from top to bottom, from fresh to salt, from sea to one sea to another. And then there's this story about a fish who walks up on land. And I say that that's not evolution. That is to say, that happens in an instant compared to evolution. And in that instant, mountain lions and eagles come into existence like a possibility. For me, the possibility, the opening, the freedom, the chance to live with those concerns, with those questions makes life an enormous privilege. So being here with you in this video is for me a very profound privilege. And for that privilege, I want to thank you. Hope you're having the best day ever. Peace, love.